Good morning. I would like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the City Governance Committee meeting of the 18th of May 2022, and I declare the meeting open at 9:57 a.m. I would like to advise attendees in the room that this meeting is being webcasted and audio recorded, and I remind attendees to take necessary safety precautions. Now, we have leave of absence. Do any councillors have a leave of absence to declare? Now, I note that we are all in the room except for Councillor Karansky, who should be joining us on Teams. She will be joining us on Teams very shortly, so she will be coming. So we have no leave of absence to record. So we'll move straight into the reports this morning, and I will now refer to item 4.1. The Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Darren Scott, has requested Anita White, the Acting Corporate Governance Manager, present this report. And Ms. White, could you please enter discussions? Oh, but before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? No. There being none, over to Ms. White. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors. I'll take the report as read. However, I just wanted to highlight a few matters. The local government regulation provides that recommendations from the Audit and Risk Committee are to be presented in a report to the CEO, who in turn must present that report to Council. On review of historical reporting, it's been identified that 4 reports were not presented as required. To ensure transparency for councillors, those reports are now presented. Appropriate arrangements have been put in place to ensure that this reporting occurs in a timely manner moving forward. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and great work, Anita, on picking up on the missed reports. On page 10, it refers to the Chair of the Audit Committee suggesting that we have a briefing to whole of Council in 2021. Did that happen? Did I just forget about it?
Through the Chair, and with respect, Councillor, I believe you may have forgotten about it. It did in fact occur, I'm instructed.
Any further questions? There being none, is there a mover for the report's motion as displayed on the screen? Thank you. Councillor Murphy has moved. Councillor Bradley has seconded. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? There being none, I will now open the floor to vote. Please raise your hand if you're in favour. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously, with the exception of Councillor Karansky, who is not on Teams as yet. That's right. I will now refer to item 4.2, and before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? There being none, I will now refer to Mr. Scott to open public discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors will be familiar with this process. This is the Q3 report of the 2021-2022 operational plan. There's 87 projects in the operational plan. 66 at this time are on track, and 14 projects are completed. That puts the health at the end of Q3, so this is Q3, at 92%. It's approximately the same as what it was at this time last year, so comparable with last year's activities. A couple of things to note for the committee. 5 projects are marked as monitor in the third quarter, and there's recovery actions within the document. Just a couple of things to pull out, I suppose, and highlight. PC 2.3.1, the Reconciliation Action Plan. We've taken a bit of a look at that. That is something which I think was ambitious for this operational plan. The concept of starting and finishing within 12 months a complete Reconciliation Action Plan, I think was ambitious. Whilst we have got measures in place, the commencement of our First Nations Community Development Officer, building the relationships with the groups, identifying internal capacities and gaps with those internal capacities, refreshing the council's reference manual for cultural awareness, etc., etc. The idea of doing those things and then getting all the way to an agreed wrap by the end of the financial year is unrealistic. there is a proposal to develop an accord wrap in the interim period, which is if you like, a halfway house towards it, progressing towards it. In reality, I think we should do this properly and spend the sufficient time to make sure that all the groups are on board with a reconciliation action plan once and for all. So that's my comments and advice around that particular one, which is monitor for the third quarter. The outdoor space, Kingston Butter Factory, so there's lift certification paperwork to finish and building classification paperwork to finish, which will be the end of May. It says early May in this report, but it'll be end of May at this time. Nonetheless, to be finished before the end of this financial year. Also of note is the Rosier Road Master Plan Stage 1, still within this document, showing monitor. In reality, we are awaiting the approval of EPBC, the federal government, around approval for activities within the master plan itself. We don't expect those to be this financial year. We expect those to be later in the year. There's a range of offset sites identified, but there's still approval from the federal government pending. That also means that the funding arrangements for it would be subject to an extension of time by the federal government. Clearly, the federal government isn't doing that at this current point in time. However, they did write to us and say they were open to the consideration of extension. So when there's a new federal government formed, we will continue with that application process for an extension of time. All right. I think that is it in terms of things I wanted to raise. Our apologies. Logan North Pool. Logan North Pool has had some extension of time awarded due to rain. There's two main activities required in that area. One is the completion of the tiling and one is the completion of the pump room. They're currently programmed as sequential. The tiling is obviously you can't tile on a wet substrate, so important for and it's an open pool. Clearly, we need good weather to achieve a long-lasting surface finish. We've had a range of discussions with the contractor and with Ben's team, looking at acceleration either through an afternoon shift or multiple fronts in the surface finish, the tiling, and running concurrently with tiling works and pump room works to achieve a September start of the school holidays, September opening of the pool. Typically, there's not much traffic in pools during the winter, but we're targeting and we will do those things necessary to get to an opening at the start of the September school holidays. So it's a time issue. It's not a budget issue. So we are within budget for the pool, but time will be outside of this current operational plan. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, and I will now open the floors to discussion, and just wanted to add there's so many puns that we could use with the pool being wet and swimmers already getting wet, but we just won't go there. Anyone have any questions? No, and I would just note that Councillor Karansky has joined us online as well now. Do I have a mover for the reports motion as displayed on the screen? There, thank you. Mayor Power has moved and Councillor Raven has seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously, including Councillor Karansky. All right, I will now refer to item 4.3. And before we open discussion, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? Okay, I note that item 4.3 is confidential, and I note that it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session as it contains information about proposed changes to organisational structure. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item? I remind thank you, Councillor Bradley. Do I have a seconder to move us into confidential? Thank you, Councillor Russell. I will now open the floor to vote to councillors to move us into confidential. Okay, that has, just keep your hands up in the air for that one. I have Mayor Power, Councillor Bradley, Councillor Russell, Councillor Fraser, Councillor Stemp, Councillor Murphy, myself and Councillor Karansky, so that has been carried, so we will move into confidential. All right, so who didn't vote then? It was Councillor Raven, Councillor Lane, Councillor Heremiah and Councillor Bannon. How do you, all right. Oh, and Councillor Hall. Okay, so Councillor Lane, how do you vote?
Against.
Councillor Raven,
Against.
Councillor Hall,
Against.
Councillor Heremiah,
Against.
Councillor Bannon.
Against.
Thank you very much, Lee. We will now move into confidential and we will just wait for the streaming to be switched off. Turn off the audio, turn back on. Thank you very much, and welcome back to those watching at home. We're just bringing the public gallery back in to the meeting, and then we're going to bring the screens back on. Beautiful. All right. I note that in confidential, we had a confidential PowerPoint that was presented to the meeting during the closed session. Therefore, this PowerPoint is required to be tabled to the meeting. Is there a mover to table the confidential document? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. I'm having a mental blank. Apologies. Councillor Bradley has moved. I now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Councillor Karansky? Can you hear? She's a yes. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we're just waiting for the reports motion to be put up on the screen. All right, I have a report on the screen. Do I have a mover for the report that's on the screen? Thank you. Mayor Power has moved. Councillor Bradley has seconded. Does anyone else wish to speak to it? No? Or I will now open the floor to vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, that marks the end of Mr. Scott's reports. Is there any general business for us today?
No, thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you. I have some general business from Councillor Lane, though.
Thanks very much through you, Madam Chair. Mr. Scott, sometimes when you're sitting in that chair, you get some feedback from us that's not super positive.
Kwong, can you turn your volume off? Okay.
Yep. So what I actually wanted to feedback was that's okay.
Solving tech problems while
The Logan Elders are organising NAIDOC Day this year, and they're hoping that it will be at the Kingston Butter Factory. Unfortunately, our Logan Elders are quite aged. They've had death of some of the elders in the community, and there's been a series of incidents where they weren't able to put their application in for events funding for NAIDOC Day for this year. I'm hoping that there is capacity for some compassion when it comes to events funding in the round. And whether or not there is an ability for you to check into whether or not we can assist them with this process. I think NAIDOC Day is one of the most important events on the calendar. So if there is capacity for that, that would be lovely.
Through you, Chair, happy to take a look. If we can talk offline and get the details, that'd be great.
Absolutely. The second thing is you mentioned the RAP that Council's working on in one of your reports. Di Andrews is an amazing addition to Council. Her work on the Deadly Awards with the Logan Elders in the community is phenomenal. She is just hitting it out of the ballpark, and I just wanted to give that feedback. And the last one is, up on level 5, it's not easy for our staff, and they're supported by some wonderful young women, Rebecca, Kylie and Sharon. And they handle a lot of calls that are very difficult and contentious with grace and dignity. So I just wanted to offer that feedback that sometimes when someone is ringing up with a mental health issue or is very angry about something that they feel they've been fobbed off on, that crew that man and assist our advisors is doing an absolutely fantastic job, and I just wanted to pass that feedback back on.
Thank you. Anyone have anything further? No? All right. I will now move on to the next item. Thank you, Mr. Scott. All right, and I will now refer to item 5.1, and I will ask Finance Manager Ms. Caroline Bugg to enter discussions. While we're waiting for her to pop up, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? No. There being none, I will now open to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Item 5.1 is the Executive Financial report for the period ending 31 March. I'll just give you a couple of the highlights of the report. The operating surplus to the end of March is $30.8 million. It's a variance to budget year to date of just shy of $6 million. And that variance is predominantly driven by savings in the expenditure, which is $5.9 million under budget. There are no significant variances in the revenue categories that haven't been identified previously. In regard to the expenditure categories, there is also nothing significant to add to previous issues raised, although we are starting to see the expenditure from the February floods tracking through our reports. That particular event and expenditure relating to that will be monitored. At the moment, we're at $2.5 million worth of direct costs. The full impact is obviously not yet known. We have received $1 million grant from Queensland Reconstruction Agency to cover the initial costs of that event. Also in the report is the financial data to the end of March for the local infrastructure program. That commences on page 86 of your agenda. Noting that subsequent to a recent committee discussion, a review of both the program and procedures supporting this program is underway. The next steps in that review is to look at the financial reporting elements of the program. Investments on page 87 of the agenda, we have acknowledged the recent QIC investment. However, there's not enough history yet to reflect the returns. Noting there is considerable market volatility currently. The investment with QIC is over 3 years, so we're very early on in that investment period. Rates and charges tracking well without any apparent impacts yet from the recent flooding event. Sundry debtors, I'll make note of the amount still outstanding for Main Roads and Transport at the time of writing, which was, we expected that payment in April. We've had an update a little over a week ago, and that is the state have had to apply for an adjustment in their agreement with the federal government, and so that's delaying the payment. We still believe payment will be received once that approval has been processed. I'm happy to take any questions.
I have one from Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, just in relation to the local infrastructure program, mentioned it's under review. Do we know when that's likely to be completed?
Through the chair, thanks for the question, Councillor Stamp. My intention is to have it completed by the end of financial year. Brendan Jackson has made some good progress, so he's basically developed a draft policy and procedure which ultimately will come through council for consideration, suggesting a few changes to the existing process. The second part of the process is to review the, as Caroline said, the finance manager said, is the accounting for and reporting of the local infrastructure program. So by the end of the financial year, so we move into the new financial year with the revised process in place.
That's great. Look, I appreciate that, and I know it's challenging when you're relying on information from various branches around council, and obviously the issues I still see is that there's expenditure which isn't filtering through to the finance branch for projects that have been completed quite some time ago, and also savings from projects which isn't coming back into unallocated. So they're just the main elements I noticed from this. So just I mentioned that, but I figured that's part of that review.
And I think it would also be really good for us to have previous year's projects that still aren't delivered, where the funds are sitting and stuff like that, because I know I still have toilet blocks from 2020 that still aren't delivered, but they're coming. All right, does anyone have anything else to add? No? Do I have a mover for the report's motion on the screen? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Do I have a seconder for the report? Thank you, Mayor Power. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thanks, that's been carried unanimously. All right, and I will now refer to item 5.2. This is the final budget amendment. Before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? No, there being none, I do note that item 5.2 is confidential, and I note that it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session. Do any councillors wish to move us into a closed session for this report? No. All right, I will hand over to Ms. Barg and just remind everyone that we're not in confidential. Go for it.
Thank you. Pardon me. Thank you, Chair. So item 5.2 is the third budget amendment for financial year 2021-22. It is the final amendment for the year, and through the process of review, we have revised the operating surplus to the end of financial year. It's increased to $11.7 million, which is an increase of just over $7 million. So that's where we expect to land at the end of the financial year. The items with a positive impact on that operating surplus are on page 95 of your agenda. There is additional revenue of just shy of $2.7 million, half of which are grants-related income, and I mentioned the $1 million from the Queensland Reconstruction Authority, which is contributing to that revenue variance. There are a couple of adjustments or groups of adjustments, one being re-provisions, which is moving the expenditure from current year to next to better reflect the timing of that spend, and also an adjustment in depreciation and capital project expenditure. The savings are being reflected in employee costs of $553,000, and that's reflective of the challenges that we're experiencing at the moment to recruit suitably qualified and experienced candidates. The only item which is reducing the surplus in this amendment are legal fees that are predominantly relating to the areas of development applications and outcomes of those applications. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Thanks. Anyone have any questions? No. There being none, do I have a mover for the reports motion as displayed on the screen? Thank you. Councillor Bradley has moved. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Stemp. She's seconded. Anyone else want to speak to the motion? No. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That's been carried unanimously. All right, that marks the end of Ms. Bugg's reports. Is there any general business for us this morning?
No, thank you, Chair.
All right. Does anyone have any general business for Ms. Bugg? Oh, Ms.
I just want to thank you for your emails in the last few days, just highlighting that there's some money that was very welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks. See ya. All right, we will now move on to item 6.1, and I will ask Administration Manager Ms. Kay Sullivan to pop up and enter discussions. Before we open discussion, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? Nope. There being none, I do note that 6.1 is confidential, and I note that it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session, as the confidential report contains information in relation to the implementation of a new policy and procedure for council for which legal advice has been sought. You moving us into confidential? Thank you very much. Councillor Bradley is moving us into confidential. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Mayor Power. Thank you. I will now open the floor to councillors to vote to move us into confidential. Please raise your hand. Thank you. That has not been carried unanimously. So I have Mayor Power, Councillor Bradley, Councillor Russell, I always forget, Councillor Raven, Councillor Stemp, Councillor Murphy, myself and Councillor Kransky in favour. Those not in favour are Councillor Lane. How do you vote?
Against.
Councillor Hall?
Against.
Councillor Hermeyer?
Against.
Councillor Bannon?
Against.
And Councillor Fraser?
Against.
Thank you very much. It has been carried, so we will move over into confidential. on and any public to be back in. Thank you very much. And have we turned off the audio recording? Thank you. All right, there is a reports motion on the screen. Do I have a mover for the motion that's on the screen? Thank you. Councillor Bannon has moved that motion. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you. Councillor Bradley has seconded the motion on the screen. Anyone else want to speak to it? No. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. All right, that marks the end of Ms Sullivan's reports. Is there any general business for us this morning? No? Yes?
No, not for me,
No?
thank
Okay.
you.
Any general business for Ms Sullivan this morning? Anyone? No? Beautiful. Great. Thank you very much. And we are moving on to item 7.1, and it's a community benefit fund request. So I will now open to item 7.1 and ask the Acting Corporate Governance Manager, Ms Anita White, please re-enter discussions. Before we open, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? Nope. There being none, I will now ask Ms White to open public discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for having me back. I will take the report as read, however I want to outline a few points. This report relates to an application by Wesley Mission Queensland requesting funding of just shy of $1,500 towards the purchase of cleaning products and maintenance items used in the flood recovery at Eagleby. The reason this request has been referred to Council for consideration is that Wesley Mission Queensland is a state organisation and therefore not an organisation based in Logan, which is a requirement of the CBF policy. However, the application does benefit the Logan community. The Mayor is supportive of the application and there is sufficient money available to meet this request. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I have questions from Councillor Murphy and... No, just Councillor Murphy. Thank you.
Thank you, through the Chair. Thank you, Anita, for bringing this report up. I'd just like to thank the Mayor for looking at this application for me, as we are at the end of the financial year. This did come through to Division 12 at first, but we have depleted all our funds. So thank you to the Mayor for supporting me with regards to this. In this time, Wesley Mission put together a volunteer team very early on in the piece in the flooding, and in our area we had 59 houses, 5 sporting clubs and 3 businesses that were affected, and those volunteers are out there on the ground. These funds were for the support of that with equipment, PPE and anything else that they required. So I think it's great value for money, and I thank the Mayor for helping me out on this.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to talk to the motion? Nope. All right. There being none, I note there is a motion on the screen. Okay. All right. We have Councillor Bradley. Oh, thank you. Councillor Bradley has moved the motion on the screen. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. Lovely. Just skipping through a few pages. All right, and we are now up to item 7.2. Before we open discussion, do any councillors have a conflict of interest to declare? I note that 7.2 is confidential and it is considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session as the status of legal proceedings will be discussed. Do councillors wish to move us into closed session for this item? No? Oh, thank you. Councillor Karansky would like to move us into confidential. Do I have a seconder for those? Thank you. Mayor Power has seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. All right, that has not been carried unanimously. Hang on, hands up again. So in favour is Mayor Power, Councillor Bradley, Councillor Russell, Councillor Raven, Councillor Fraser, Councillor Stemp, Councillor Murphy, myself, Councillor Karansky. Not in favour is Councillor Bannon. How do you vote? Against. Councillor Jeremiah?
Against.
Against. Councillor Hall?
Against.
Thank you. We will now... Oh, sorry, Councillor Lane. Sorry.
Against. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, we will move into confidential and we will turn off the video recording. All right. We're just waiting so that we can turn the recordings back on and audio back off. Awesome. We are good to go. We have a motion on the screen. Do I have a mover for the motion that's on the screen? Do you need to cast your eyes over it? Thank you. Councillor Bannon has moved the motion on the screen. Do I have a seconder for the motion on the screen? Thank you, Mayor Power. Anyone else want to speak to it? No. All those in favour, please raise a hand. Okay, that has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, that marks the end of Ms White's reports. Does anyone have any general business for Ms White this morning? Thank you, Councillor Bradley.
Yeah, thank you. Just curious, being the acting manager at the moment, from a governance perspective, when someone writes to council anonymously, do we have to respond? Does council have to respond?
Through the chair, curious question. If they're anonymous, it's hard to know who you're responding to.
Yes.
So I can't imagine if you don't know who it came from, you've got anyone to be able to respond to.
Thank you. That was a really good answer.
I think it's very hard if they write as in a letter form.
I'll just clarify. Email council@logan but they don't actually have a name or anything to identify who they are.
So through the chair, it may be one we should take offline, councillor, so I can understand more around the details of your specific query.
Okay. Thank you.
I think I've had a few that haven't had names attached, and I've just gone back to them and I've said, can you please provide your name and your address so that I can actually further investigate? That might be handy. Lovely. Anything else? No? Do you have any GB for us?
Not today, thanks, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. All right, that completes the agenda for today. Does anyone have any general business for Mr Strachan? No? Lovely. That completes today's agenda, and I declare the City Governance Committee meeting 18th of May concluded at 11:44. Everyone's hot to trot, so thank you very much.